Okay, well, friends, I think I'm gonna get us started because we start with some housekeeping anyway, and then Kira can continue to let people in for a few minutes, and we don't get to the meat of the evening for a few more minutes anyway. So it's a lovely to have so many of you here with us this evening. For those of you who don't know me, and I'm not sure how many people are on here that I don't know. I think I recognize all the names, but I'm Jennifer Preston, and I serve as both the General Secretary and also the Indigenous Rights Coordinator at Canadian Friends Service Committee, CFSC, and we are thrilled to have you with us here this evening. I'm just going to give you a couple of reminders. One is we are recording this Zoom session. So if you don't want to be part of a recording, all you need to do is turn the video off on your computer, and then you won't show up in the recording. We are recording it so it can be shared with people who couldn't be here tonight. Then they will be able to see it. And also we will be sharing it and having it in the archives. So that's just the note about the recording. And I want to give a land acknowledgement. CFSC's offices are located in downtown Toronto, in Friends House, Toronto Monthly Meetings Friends House, which is on the traditional territory of the Wendat people, the Petun people, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit. And this land has been the site of human activity for over 15,000 years. Now, of course, there are all types of Indigenous peoples that live in the land of Toronto, and we are happy to have our offices there and be able to work in that space. We are going to start with just a moment of worship before we get into the evening. And if there's anyone on tonight that isn't familiar with the Quaker tradition of meeting for worship, I'll just say very briefly that we're going to settle into silence only for a few minutes just to ground us before we begin and to allow us to feel centered before we start our evening. So I'm just going to start our meeting for worship now, and we will get the main meat of the evening going in a few minutes. So I invite you to join me in some silent worship. Good evening again, friends. It's a pleasure to have so many of you with us and this wonderful and bizarre technology called Zoom, where we get to see so many of your faces joining us. It's lovely. So now I'm going to hand the mic over to my colleague, Kira Mann, who is going to just go through some technical components before we get started. Kira?
Thanks, Jen. Just super quickly, I'm just going to ask that everybody keep themselves muted unless you are taking part in the discussion after Orion speaks. I'd also like to invite friends, you're welcome to use the chat, but please do keep it a safe and respectful space. And, during the discussion, I would encourage you to actually sort of indicate or jump in when there's an opening during the discussion section to speak yourselves instead of putting it in the chat, but do whatever feels right for you. If you're having issues with connectivity, I'd recommend that you sign off and then sign back on again, and sometimes that'll fix the problem. You're welcome to send me a message in chat directly, and I'm happy to try and help, but I'm not a tech wizard, so I'll do what I can. And finally, Jen mentioned this before, but I just want to mention it again for those that have joined us since, is this event is being recorded for the Quaker archives and to share with friends who are not able to join us tonight. So if you do not want to be part of that recording, I just ask that you turn off your video. And beyond that, I'll hand it back over. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Kira. So just to get us started, for those of you who this is your first time joining this series, because this year is the 90th anniversary of Canadian Friends Service Committee, we decided to host this year-long series of Get to Know Thee Friend. So once a month, all year long, we're going to have a friend come and spend the evening with us just to share and to talk, and so we can all get to know some of the friends who have been a part of making CFSC what it is over a period of 90 years. Well, we don't have people from the very beginning, sad to say. But we're very pleased to be able to be doing this. CFSC is the justice arm of Canadian Quakers, and we have a small office in Friends House in Toronto. We have a small staff of 6 people, some of whom are part-time, and we do a lot of work generally under 3 pragmatic areas of Indigenous rights, peace, and justice, criminal justice work. And so for us, when basically our work changed dramatically about 13 months ago, we thought to ourselves, okay, how are we going to do some of the work that we would normally do in other ways this year? And one of the things we've been doing a lot of this year is working with online events, which had the delightful silver lining of meaning that we could host events, CFSC could host events and have people from coast to coast to coast and even from other continents join us. So we're very pleased about that. It's been great for us to be able to do. We've enjoyed it very much. Because we are celebrating 90 years of Quaker service in Canada this year, we did some extra things. One of them is we created a 90th anniversary website, which we encourage you to check out. It has different stories and photos over the whole 90 years of CFSC's history. And see if Kira's going to put the link to that in the chat. And we are looking to identify still some people in some of the photos. If you have any information, please let us know. And Kira will post it. And also, if you have any great photos that you know are in your collection that we may want to add to this collection, send them over to Kira. She will be happy to add them to our collection. So now it gives me pleasure to introduce our friend for this evening. And she should be on your screen as well. My dear friend, Jane Orion Smith. Jane Orion was born in Toronto and grew up mainly in Ontario, but a few other places as well. She graduated with a Bachelor of Arts from Dalhousie University. And she, like me, started her young adult career life working in professional theater out of the very vibrant theater community of downtown Toronto. Whenever that was that we were there, I'm guessing that was
80s.
80s and 90s, 80s and 90s.
Yep.
So that's Jane Orion and I have that in common. That's where we started. And Jane Orion was a professional lighting designer. For those of you who don't know, fast facts about her that will be good for trivia night.
I'm
And
greenfield.
later, she became what I am lovingly referring to as a professional Quaker, but started out as a lighting designer. And Orion and I met for the first time, I remember actually, at Friend's house in Toronto. It was in 1999, which I realize today means that we have been friends for more than 20 years, which is somewhat astonishing, but true. And she started working at CFSC. She came in to the job of general secretary, or at that time called the coordinator, in January of 2020, right after Y2K, when the world did not blow up. And Orion joined our staff team then. And she came to us after spending some time at both Woodbrook in the UK and Pendle Hill in Pennsylvania. Orion is married to her delightful spouse, Janet. They've been married since 2005. That's Janet. And Orion has a sister and a brother. Some of you, I'm sure, had the opportunity to work with Orion over the 15 years that she served as General Secretary, faithfully and lovingly serving Canadian Friends. And in January of 2015, as some of you know, she had a fall slipping on the ice while walking her dog. And the end result was a traumatic brain injury, which essentially led to her early retirement, as it were. And I'll tell you that when she had that fall, she sends me a selfie, and she has a black eye in the selfie. And she sends me a selfie, and she's like, "Look what I did to myself, falling in the park." She said, "Boy, I'm going to come up with a story that I was at a bar when this happened." So, yes, you did. I was like,
I got into a tangle at Monica and Jeffrey's 12th night the night before.
That's right.
Yes.
So at that time, she did not realize, none of us realized the seriousness of the injury. But sadly, as the months went on, she realized that her brain, in fact, didn't want to go back to the place that it had been before the accident. However, I think it's quite important for us all to be aware that Orion, having a traumatic brain injury doesn't make a person incapable. So it means that she couldn't remain as CFSC's general secretary, but it doesn't change who she is in her essence and in her core. And when we were planning this series, we were talking about friends that we would like to participate in this series. And of course, everybody wanted Orion to participate, but we didn't want to ask her to do something that was going to be hard on her. So we talked to her about it, and she agreed to participate tonight because she loves us and because we love her. But if her head decides to flare up at us, she may decide to take a break, or we may decide to end early, just letting you know. And the other thing we're going to do tonight is, rather than Orion just give a straight presentation the way we've done the other months, we're going to do it in a bit of an interview style where I'm asking her questions and she's responding to the questions. And that'll make it a little easier. And Janet is there too, to give support right there. So before we get into our questions, I'm just going to say to all of our studio audience that Jane Orion and I have been quite literally through good, bad, and ugly together in the past 20-something years. That is not something to be denied. But it gives me enormous pleasure to be facilitating this evening with her. And when we talk about 90 years of service of Canadian Friends at Canadian Friends Service Committee, Orion is certainly an extraordinary character in the history of our organization. So now, Orion, we will start at the beginning. Can you give us a little bit of a description how you became involved with Quakers?
I'd be glad. First, I want to thank you for that really warm and very generous introduction. I hope you get this equally wonderful and celebratory introduction to yours, which I will look forward to. Maybe I'll get to do. Anyway, how I became a friend. I have been, I guess, a member for about 30 years, but I came across the Quakers. Just step back one step. I became a Quaker because I was searching for a spiritual home. I guess most people are, but I had grown up. I had my mother suffered from paranoid schizophrenia. That's the short version, and was an alcoholic, and my dad wasn't around much. He was working and on the road, and I was in and out of foster care a lot when my mom was sick. So I was in and out of 24 placements over the time of growing up, which is a lot. And I had a lot of stuff to sort out, as you can imagine. And the first place I found a real sense of healing and wholeness I was going to say art, but really it was being gay. But okay, we'll say gay and then art. And that's why I became a lighting and a set designer. But I found that it wasn't really doing something that needed to happen in my soul. There was something more I needed in life. In fact, the more I kind of got better or did some of that healing, the more I needed something to speak to the soul's piece. So I started going on a little search. So I was living in, this point, it was a U of W. I started my degree there. And a friend of mine, I checked at the Mennonites first because of their social justice background. There was kind of a liberal, now I know it was a liberal Mennonite church, but they really didn't have it together on women. And I was the only woman there in slacks. I mean, that was the least of it. But I figured, okay, if they don't have it together on women, they're really not going to have it together on gay people. So a friend of mine said, why don't you check out the Quaker meeting? Because she had also been searching. So that's where I landed, was at the Quaker meeting at Kitchener-Waterloo and Kitchener area monthly meeting. And I knocked on the door. And Wendy McPherson answered the door, and she said, you might want something to read, which I didn't, but I went in, sat down, there were 7 people there. And I looked around and they all looked so nerdy. Like I can't even begin to tell you how square they looked at people, like buttoned right up to the top, right? And by the end of that hour, I was like, well, I think these are my people. It's like that. It wasn't then an intellectual choice. It was like, oh my God, this is my home. So I grabbed a book on the way out called Mothers of Feminism, because I figured I thought they've got to at least have it kind of together on women, or I don't know how I'm going to survive this. And that's how it all began. And I don't think I would have expected, because I was quite a little radical lesbo artist from Toronto, big city of Toronto. And if anyone had met me back then, it's quite a contrast to the way most Quakers were, I suppose. But since then, I've been a part of a number of meetings, because I left there, went to Halifax, to Dow, then to Victoria, then, obviously Woodbrook, Pendle Hill, Toronto, Yonge Street, and now Winnipeg. So I have a pretty lovely cross-section of experience with a number of meetings across the country, which was a good thing to bring to the service committee, I have to say, that I lived on both coasts as well as growing up in Ontario.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
That's a full explanation, isn't it?
It's an excellent answer.
Okay.
So then maybe take us to the next step, where how the Quaker faith that you had already discovered and found to be your people played a role with the service work that you undertook at CFSC.
Well, I'll step back one sec, because I just hadn't thought of it, but I think it kind of, it predated that, in that, the kind of theater work I did, sort of like you, Jen. You worked at Native Earth, and you were often looking at cultural and social issues. And the kind of work I was interested in was New Canadian works dealing with social issues. And for me, I found I kind of got led out of theater. The more I was with the Quakers, the more there was a disconnect for me staying in the arts, which they sound funny to some Quaker artists, but I found it hard for my values on an issue I found hard to make my values and my work kind of fully come together. And it may be, when you're working on the technical side, I think the experience is kind of different than other places in the creative spectrum of the business. But I found it was first taking place within that, where there's kind of an awakening of having my spiritual life inform my work life. And that was kind of interesting. At the service committee, it was a big question from the day when I arrived, because as you may remember, when I arrived, I came from Pendle Hill, and I had been working on this stuff about James Naylor and trying to bring some of his writings back and his story back to the community. And that, of course, ended up kind of parked when I came to CFSC. But I'd spent my head in the 17th century for quite a while at that point. And I was like, how do these worlds come together? And how they come together is through the experience of the Spirit and faith. So to me, it was just always been foundational that I realized service work is really tough. I mean, think about the issues we're working on, Jen. I mean, or like I was working on, well, very soon after I arrived, like the war resistors and the war on, even before the war resistors, the war on terror, the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan. Like peace was my file initially, one of my files. There was just so many pressures, so many different components to the work, or the jails work, or there were child soldiers was an issue we were working on back then that was just brutal. And you got to have something to kind of ground you and hold you and sit within or something, because this work can kind of, destroy you in a way. I hate that, sounds really kind of rough, but I think just things can be, some of the issues can involve such painful stories and experiences. I mean, you meet amazing, resilient people doing amazing work. And there's obviously lots of fun and laughter that we always have, but the work is unrelenting. Justice is never on our timeline. You've got to just stay centered. You got to stay centered in yourself, centered in the Spirit, and try to negotiate what you feel is the next right thing to do. And I would say that's true whether it's with the programmatic work, right? Like you're doing, Jen, or a lot of the administrative work that I was doing. I think they were, I would equally have to bring them to both. There wasn't, you can be pushing paper and be grounded in the Spirit at the same time. So, being present, having to be flexible, having to be open, recognizing, that no job was too small, that if there were things that you could do to help advance the work, center down and see if you have to pivot to that, if that's the right thing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I totally know exactly what you mean, because there are definitely many, many, many days in the year when the work can swallow you. I mean, there's victories too, but there's lots of days when it's just hard. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you've got to hope, you're trying to reach hearts and minds. And if you really want to reach hearts and minds, you've got to sort of be somehow grounded in that place that can then speak to them, right?
Yeah.
So I used to, with writing letters to government, I was like centering into prayer and trying to write out of that place, because I mean, I didn't know who was going to read it, but I figured my best hope, if anyone read it, of it ever getting any attention ever, was to be coming from a genuine place and a grounded place, along with the facts of the issue. The intention mattered to me, if only for me, I suppose, but you have to believe more.
Yeah, intention matters. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So then, in terms of intention, what would you say, like when you first came to CFSC, what brought you here? When you were at Pendle Hill, you were doing this work on James Naylor, you were living in the 17th century, and then there was a posting that came across your desk that said CFSC is hiring a new coordinator. So what made you leave Mr. Naylor behind and come north?
No. It was no given. It was kind of interesting because I was committed to what I was doing. I was on a scholarship to do this work. I was going to produce, kind of this book. But at any rate, I guess several people prodded me, and it was like, no, I'm busy. No, I've got this that I'm doing. And then I guess at a certain point, I said, well, I'll look at someone sent me the job description. And it could have even been you, or maybe Brian, somebody sent me the job description. But well, I mean, that's what you do, right? If you
Yeah.
do outreach to, it's not about trying to preference a candidate. It's about you try to do outreach to people that you think will be good candidates. But at any rate, I finally got, so I looked at the job description. I was like, it wasn't what I imagined. So I thought, oh, I've got a lot of these skills. I'd actually be pretty okay about this, but I'm busy. So I'm busy with this. But it kept kind of getting prod. I think I had about 3 or 4 people say I should apply. And so I had a clearness committee actually at Pendle Hill, and decided, well, what did it matter? I would learn something through the application process, and we'd go from there. And it was just really one step at a time, I mean, then I was in Toronto and got interviewed and was offered the job and found myself saying yes to Carol Dixon. And well, how do you say no to Carol Dixon? Put it that way. Can anyone say no to Carol Dixon? And Pete Cross. Pete was on my interviewing committee, and Gordon McClure. Yeah, it was a good committee. So that's how it was. It was really unexpected. It wasn't planned, and it was quite a surprise. But it felt absolutely right when I said yes. And then I had to figure again, how does James kind of come together? And it was, a lot of this world turned upside down stuff about trying to remake the world, trying to create a more just world. I mean, it happens through practical means of changing, policy, negotiating with government, working at grassroots levels, supporting grassroots levels. All these change making is it's the same story.
Mhm.
It's the same story.
Well, I wish that I had some home videos of the office and the 2 of us in the office back in those days, but I don't. Sadly, for everyone else, they don't get to watch home videos of the 2 of us being a bit like the Marx Brothers in the CFSC office 20 freaking years ago when we were both young women. However, we
I
do.
know.
I
The
know
one
we were.
constant. It's you, me, and Grey's Anatomy, right?
Right,
Like that's the
right.
constant. 17 years of us watching Grey's Anatomy together.
It's true.
Now,
It's totally true.
people may wonder why I bring that up, but I have to tell you that almost everyone I know who's in NGO kind of work has their little outlet, right? Because, it's stressful and it's really intense issues. So like everybody's got their thing. It could be entertainment television. It could be food television. And for Jen and I, it's Grey's Anatomy. I don't
It's
know
Grey's
what
Anatomy.
it counts in the end. We're just going to die.
Yeah, we are loyal Grey's Anatomy watchers. And we even, now that we live so far away from each other, we even sometimes we will either be on the phone while we're watching it, or sometimes we'll be watching it, both of us at the same time, and then we're texting during the show, and sometimes we call each other during the commercials. So yes, we can watch TV together even when I'm in Guelph and she's in Winnipeg.
Sad part is we kind of almost see them as real people. Now and again, I have to remind Jen, it's like they're not real.
They're not real. They're not really in our lives. They're not really in our lives.
Yes.
But in the absence of home movies, what we do have is a series of photographs. So what we're going to do is Kira is going to share her screen. And when Kira shares her screen, she's going to put up a series of photos. And when with the photos, Orion is going to offer some stories or reflections about what she sees, what she remembers when she looks at those photos. So this is a bit of almost like, it's almost like party games, folks. So Kira, we're ready for our first photo.
All right.
Okay, come on, Kira. Where's the photo?
This looks like my concussion. That big.
Yeah.
When I
What's
the
going
ice
on here.
Sorry,
down on the tech.
Oh, can you see that?
Well, we can see a black screen that says Kira has started screen sharing, but we don't see a photo.
Oh.
1 second. Let me do it one other way. Sorry, my computer's having a moment.
I could randomly, or Janet could randomly.
Oh, here we go.
Hey.
Here we go.
Hey, do you remember this, Jen? I remember this.
Yeah, I remember that. You go.
Okay, this is a yearly meeting in 2001. And it's just before, I remember some of you may recognize Gitsatanamuk on the far left, who's frequently come to yearly meeting and been very involved with the Quakers work and been a partner of the service committee. Nissa Puffer, who was an intern actually at CUNO. Betty Peterson, what can you say? And Vic Yellowhawk White, who worked for CFSC. And why are they all there? We hosted a panel on racism at that yearly meeting because we were involved in the conference on racism this was in the lead up to the UN conference on racism that was happening in South Africa. And it was a really important conference, just to really, that the conversation obviously the conversation on racism had been going on for a long time, but it sort of took it a new level to have this UN conference. And it was just this most amazing panel, people talking about the work they were doing. And Betty especially, Betty was doing lunch counters sit-ins in the 1940s. And it just blew my mind when I heard about that. Absolutely, stunning and amazing. But it also reminds me, like, the range of people and partners we worked with. We did so much work with AFSC on different issues over the years. Vic was a partner of yours, Jen, and working with the CUNOs, of course, on a whole range of issues. So that's that story. It was if anyone was there, I actually am so sorry it didn't get recorded because the testimonies from each of them were just so powerful and wonderful.
We didn't have Zoom then. We weren't able to Zoom it out.
We didn't video it. It was sad.
Kira, give us another picture.
Next photo coming up.
Yes. I guess I should say I organized the panel. That's why I have the picture. But it was a really important issue to my heart. Still is. This, okay. Well, I gotta say, this is a shot from the Toronto March against the war in Iraq, and which was one of the biggest marches that had ever happened in Canadian history. The marches around the world were among the largest ever, which was just stunning. And of course, you see Junetta Chenard and Helen Melbourne, who later worked at the service committee, and of course, Phyllis Fisher, who's sadly recently deceased, and just such an amazing woman. But it certainly flags up for me my memories of that time. I mean, I flew home from Geneva on 9/11, which you may remember, Jen. I was coming back from Geneva because I had been there. I was invited there to come and go to an off the record section around meeting on trade-related intellectual property rights, which became the focus of the Quaker International Affairs program, as you may remember. And it was actually where the Declaration on Access to Medicines was negotiated before it went to Doha, where it was accepted. And this stuff is all coming into play right now around the vaccines, interestingly enough.
Right.
But anyway, coming home, 9/11, halfway, I'm like 2 hours in the air, and then I find out that, something's happened. We're on this massive plane, something's happened. My plane, thankfully, got cleared to Halifax, Montreal, then Toronto, got off the plane. Nobody is there. Every person of color got pulled off to be interviewed. It was pretty shocking, and it was shocking that you land and you find out, the World Trade Centers have been hit, and the Pentagon's been hit. And I think the moment the pilot said the Pentagon was hit, I knew we were going to war. And that's the worst day for anybody who's working at the service committee, because we never want. It's funny, I talked to people who had been in my role before me, and they all said they really dreaded the thought that Canada would ever be going to war on their watch. And so this seemed like it was going to be like, pardon the expression, like the mother of all wars. Potentially, it was just horrifying. But again, it brings me back to that point about faith. Is like, all right, like all I got is this moment. And I can only be where I am now, and we can only do what we can do in this moment. And I remember Margaret Ford and I wrote this, I thought was a very good letter in the aftermath of that. I think it's in the Faith and Practice. And I think it reflects our spiritual thoughts at the time. But it just rolled out this massive program of work on the war on terrorism, just absolutely massive, so many components, anti-terrorism legislation, racism, people being picked up, anti-Muslim sentiment, so many dimensions. And then of course, just the efforts to try to roll out, to try to stop the war in Afghanistan, which didn't work. But this, I mean, this march, I mean, the witness of people on the street and the churches together actually made the difference in Canada choosing not to go into the war in Iraq. And that I know for a fact. That the Prime Minister cited that if it wasn't for the influence of the churches. So who says we still don't have any influence?
That's right. That's right. And I know that work,
And the war business.
I know that the work coming out in 9/11 really ended up being a part of what you did for the entire rest of your time at Service Committee. Really, some of the work that germinated there, and I would say in some ways, continues today in different ways, but certainly was defining for your entire tenure.
Well, some of that civil liberties work, some of the work the International Civil Liberties Monitoring Group does now still links back to that, the anti-terrorism legislation, the surveillance. Because often what happens, and it's the same with the pandemic, is under the guise of all this chaos, you can have other agendas running, right? So I'm sure there was some need, obviously, obviously you want to try to catch terrorists before they do anything. This is true. But it also created the space whereby they could be surveilling other people's and get away with it. That's the way I'll just say it, like it can expand, overreach. And there's a lot of that happened out of, that we're still living with today, out of, 9/11 and the war on terror. Absolutely is
right. Okay, Kira, give us another photo, Kira.
Toss it up.
Come on, don't we have one what have we got?
Hey, well, this relates. Hey,
nice. Look at the Chandlers. Look at them.
It's Sarah and Trevor Chandler and Catherine Novak and two of her cherubic little children. Absolutely beautiful. Visitation. One of the great joys was going out and doing visitation at Quaker meetings, and here we are in Lillooet, where we had an amazing time in Lillooet. This actually was. Now, some people, when they get engaged, they go on, maybe they do something special, right? I took Janet on a war on terrorism visitation tour.
Very nice. Very nice.
Janet, for those who do not know, is a biblical scholar, and her area is apocalypticism, like what she studied. And so the war on terrorism was following a lot of what's the word you would use? Ideology. The ideology of the war on terrorism actually mimicked a lot of ancient apocalyptic thought. So Janet would map out the ideology, and I would map out the issues, and we taught, interactively with the group. It was so great. We had a really good time on that war on terror tour.
Friends, they remain happily married to this day.
Oh, Sarah and Trevor? Or us?
No,
yes, they're happy, and Sarah and Trevor, they're still happily together.
Trevor also survived the visit of Jane, Orion, and Janet.
Great hospitality, the Lillooet folks. They were just amazingly hospitable. I remember Catherine and her husband at the time, Bernard, made this fantastic salmon dinner for it. They had us over, fantastic salmon dinner. We were so impressed, but they were like, oh my God, we're so sick of salmon, because in their salmon was just like there all the time, and they were living on limited means. So what looked like a very sumptuous, it was a sumptuous dinner, but to them it was. Remember in the olden days, it was like they'd say like lobster was the poor man's. It was like that. Anyway.
I also had a wonderful visit with Sarah and Trevor at their farm once, which was also a very long time ago, because I measure everything in life by the age of my Sarah, and I think she was 5 when we went there. So that's a long time ago.
You're long overdue.
But yes, perhaps I need to go back.
You need to go for the honey.
Yeah,
because the honey is really good.
honey is good. Honey is good.
Yes.
Okay, Kira, give us another one. Oh, yay. I love this picture.
We're looking good there, Jan.
We are looking good. Look at us.
Good. So, this must have been the year then that the declaration must be 2007. Do you
Yeah.
think?
Summer of 2008. Would have been the summer of 2008. Yeah.
Celebrating the declaration when it was adopted in New York.
Yeah.
Which is pretty great. Yeah, Jen and I went out. This is in Alberta. Big surprise. And the whole point of yearly meeting, I hate to say this, but the whole point for us at yearly meeting, at least for me, was how do I escape yearly meeting? I always had to have my opportunities to kind of get off site. And so one of our little off-site journeys was to go was to this Western store, I guess. Yeah.
Yep.
And we picked up hats.
We got hats. We're in Alberta. We're getting cowboy hats. We looked fantastic. Look at us. I still have my hat. Do you have your hat?
No, I don't have my hat.
I have my hat.
I'm sorry. I wish I had my hat. It'd be a lot more useful out here now. Ontario, I look like a dork, but here.
Well, I can't say that I wear my hat particularly often.
You can wear your hat on your horse, and it would look like downtown Toronto. If I wore that hat, that looked like wouldn't fly.
I guess that's true.
No.
I guess that's true. All right, Kira, what else have you got for us?
All right. Well, some of you are going to recognize yourselves here because I know, Carol may have left by now. Carol Dixon, second from the right. Far red left, Pete Cross, still around. All these, this is probably from, I'm guessing probably about 2001 or 2, because Margaret Ford is there kind of beside Carol, and they were co-clerking. What it brings back for me, and Mona Callan in the center, who's no longer with us, which is sad, and sort of between Margaret and Carol at the back, John Sparling also sadly has left us, and Charlie Diamond in the glasses, and John Prescott on the other side. That's John Sparling. Anyway, the point of this is, I mean, so much of the work, the people always think of and they should, the programmatic work of the service committee, but what kind of holds, it's like the bowl kind of that helps hold all that is its structure and its governance and its policies and all that stuff. That kind of helps provide kind of, it's like a bowl that holds this stuff that's able to live itself out.
Yep.
And it's people give an awful lot of time to that kind of the work is important. People think it doesn't matter, but I think sometimes I think that if we have a good structure that's serving your organization, it's serving your work, right?
Absolutely.
That's the whole point.
Absolutely.
And, these folks just gave an amazing amount of energy and time to help, oversee the finances or the fundraising or personnel issues or, all the other different pieces to kind of keep the organization chugging along. So I'm incredibly grateful to all of them. Charlie, of course, I love because Charlie would always call me up about 2 days before the meeting. This would be the CFSC executive, and he'd say, tell me about every document. So he didn't read, really. He really didn't read. So then it'd be like, give me the summary. So I just flip through and it's like, this is about this is about that.
It's 100% true. You know what? NGOs come and go, really, in a blink of an eye. They come and go. And I think that the fact that we are celebrating 90 years of service is not accidental. It didn't happen. It didn't happen just because. It happened because so many friends over so many decades committed. And yep, CFSC has been so blessed to have the funding to be able to have staff to carry the work on a daily basis, but without the commitment of so many friends in nurturing the service organization as a whole. That's why we're celebrating our 90th year, and we're we're in good shape as an organization, and we have good governance. That's it definitely, it happened with intention and with a commitment of so many people.
Well, I have to say, I'm so glad. Like, one of the last things that I was able to do was working on revising the structure, because the structure you had when I joined was, if you were appointed to the service committee, you served on an administrative committee, and then you also would serve on a program committee. But you also then, if you were like it's beyond particular roles, then you would also be on the executive. And so sometimes people were on 2 or 3 different committees, and it expected a lot of different types of gifts from a very small set of people. And it might not just be not their gift, it might not be their passion or their calling, or so when we finally, like, the seeds of that went back, like, for 25 years before, people had been saying, this isn't working, this isn't working, this isn't working. And so I assembled 25 years of minutes and reports. And we sat down, it's like, okay, we finally, like, let's do this. Let's get this done. We can do this and create a better organization and free up more energy to where people can put their energy where they want to. So the people that actually love, really enjoy doing finance work, hard to imagine, but they are out there, and I'm very grateful. Thank you, Pete Cross. And I see you. And or HR work, or whatever, kind of a little policy geek, but not for program work. Like, it's so critical that you have those people, but they're not going to be your program people. And program people are not admin people. Let's face it, they are not usually. Rare bear, that's both. So why not focus their energies and use them more fruitfully? That just seemed to be the vision. So I was grateful that kind of came to a conclusion just as I was kind of just before I got finished off, one might say.
No, it's totally true. It's
And the
totally
same
true.
with the strategic plan. Finally
Yeah.
getting to the point of saying, let's think more thoughtfully, that this can be a part of our spiritual practice. It's not an of the world thing. We can do it in a way that's of our world.
Yeah.
Part of our discipline.
Yep. And I think that the leadership there around changing the structure, it's also really hard, I think, sometimes for friends to do things in a manner that may be different than the way we've done them for 2 decades. And if you say, why do we do it that way? The answer is, well, we did it that way for 2 decades. And I think it's sometimes hard for us to break out of that. And we really did. It was really a great piece of work for us all to have the boldness to say, we're not going to do it the same way we've been doing it. We're going to find a structure that suits the needs of the organization better, and also speaks to the gifts of the friends that want to be serving on CFSC better. And it's true. It was, I guess, the last big piece of work that you had done. And it's fantastic.
And yet things didn't change, in that what's at the center of that work is, from the structural perspective, is meeting for worship with attention to business. And that didn't change. You still have a clerk and a recording clerk, and you still have an agenda. You're still, trying to do that work in that worshipful manner. Like, that didn't change, So the thing that was important, the most important thing to not change, didn't change.
That's right. That's right. Kara, do you have any more photos for us?
I could go all day, Jen.
Okay, give us one more. And then I have one other thing I want to ask Orion about, but give us one more photo first.
Okay.
Hey.
Oh, looky there.
This is pre-service committee, I will admit. See, wasn't I cool?
Look at you. Weren't you cool?
I was like cool, and I was lesbian hot, let me tell you. Like, I was like, ask her. This is like around the young friends. Hey, that's kind of where I got my start in Quaker work. Was my first thing I got appointed to was being the you would not believe it. I went to yearly meeting and I became, well, the first thing is I served was, sorry, Sarah, Chandler, and Sue from Ottawa. No,
Hill?
Hill
Yeah.
on the epistle committee for yearly meeting. That's the first thing I did. But I became the clerk of Young Friends yearly meeting, like within a year. Like that was just insane. But you know, people are crazy. They give you opportunities that you really shouldn't be given, but I was, and so I took it. And I got involved a bit more with Young Friends. I was not the clerk of Young Friends here, but I was running a Young Friends program out at Western Half Yearly Meeting. And I don't know how it was, because like I grew up around old people. Like I grew up in foster care, and then I grew up around old people, you know, my old relatives. So I didn't really understand kids. They were very gracious with me. But what's important is like, I look at this, like two of these folks became interns. Miriam Maxey, who's right in front of me. And on the
Orion is the one in the orange scarf. Here is Orion,
I'm
right
the one
there.
in the orange scarf.
Yeah.
And right in front of me is Miriam Maxey, who became an intern for us. And on the far end on the right is Sarah Dick, who became an intern. And, you know, I mean, that program is so, I wanted to kind of raise this just to say, you know, I mean, what I think a critical program, the internship program was. I mean, it was started up before I arrived. But when I arrived, I mean, one of the things that was really important was that I always tossed them meaningful pieces of work, sink or swim.
Yeah.
Yes, photocopying. Yes, running to the bank. Yes, learning to do all those grunty things that we all have to learn to do. That's part of like, you have to be learning to do, you do what needs to be done, right? So if I needed to sweep the floor, I swept the floor, right? But so many of these young folks that came through the internship program are doing amazing things.
Yeah.
You know, Barb Everdeen is doing fantastic work out west with her own consulting firm. Miriam works as a social worker in Vancouver. Sarah, I don't know what she's doing, but she's amazing.
He is amazing.
The whole list. But even ones that didn't stay in justice work, we were talking about Jessie Starling, who had come from the United States. And, you know, about 5 more years after, she sent me a letter telling how like she'd gone into like a PhD program for Buddhism, but talked about like the impact of that program and how it affected her way of seeing and being in the world. You know, her time at the service committee. And so many have said that, you know, Rachel, who was here, similarly, it's such an important opportunity for young people to be able to not just get experience in the justice work, but also to do it from a faith-based perspective and learn to honor that piece in the work and in themselves, because you really have to find a way to, you know, to honor and hold on to that in yourself if you're going to be in this for the longer haul.
Yes, you are an awesome mentor to interns. I remember one of the interns, you said to me several years later, remember so-and-so? And I was like, nope, it was gone. But you were awesome with all of the interns. And even when there was challenging times with interns who maybe it wasn't the best fit, or maybe it wasn't what they had expected, or other things were going on in their lives, you were an awesome mentor and awesome at being able to give them some space and some grounding and some mentorship and helping them on to the next step in their journeys.
Oh, that's nice. I mean, you know, looking back, I mean, I can see so many things that I could have done more or done better. I mean, in a way, I was young when I arrived at the service committee. I was 35, 36, which doesn't sound young, but I think I might have been a young 35 or 36.
We were so young, Orion, very young.
Yeah, we were young, but you know, I grew a lot tremendously through my time at service committee. You know, if you worked with me in the first few years at the service committee, and then you know, I was a handful. Hopefully I was less of a handful at the end, except for Jennifer. Jennifer, I was always a handful for.
The good, bad, the ugly. That's it. Some of the stories we take to our graves. Now, I'm just mindful of the time.
Yes. Questions from the folks out there?
In the audience. I know that Orion would love to hear from some of you who may have some questions for her. And what I'm going to ask you to do, because it's already 8 o'clock, so I'm going to ask people not to ask her fantastically long questions, because we'd like to be able to get to a few of you. So please, I see Caroline Perry has her hand up. So Caroline, let's have your question.
Okay, I would love to have you go back, Jane Orion, to that first
Yeah.
meeting you went to in Kitchener-Waterloo.
Okay.
You said these were geeky looking people,
Oh my
and
God.
when it was over, you felt like you had found your home. What happened spiritually in that initial experience? And then what were the next layers of it? Because you've talked a lot about bringing the spirit to your work, but I want to know what thing turned or changed right at that juncture.
Well, it was actually really interesting, that first meeting and the subsequent few. The first one I remember is I sat down. I remember it so distinctly. It was a small group of people. There was a round table in the center. There was a candle in the center of the table. I remember sitting down and it was just like I fell into the silence. Like it was just, I just dropped down into it. And I think that was surprising. You know, that hour passed really quickly for me. I just went to another place. It just was deep and rich, and I'd occasionally look around at people. And Jana was saying to me when I mentioned the story the other day, she said, you know, it's good to remember that the assumptions we make about people when we look at them, right? So I look around the room, and to me, I looked around the room and I thought, these are all the folks that I'd normally think would be my enemy, right? Because I'm like, you know, we're talking back 1989. I had been working in very political theater, and I was gay, and, you know, gay and church didn't really go together. And, you know, people who looked conservative usually often had very conservative values, or that's what you assume. But also, any rate, yeah, it challenged so I looked around the room, my assumptions were all getting challenged, because it was like, these are my people. That's like, that was the message from within me. And it was interesting, I told Janet as well that you know, after meeting, that often share some food together. But they weren't bringing like whole casseroles and stuff. People would bring like an apple or like a sandwich or two, or, you know, a couple of oranges. It wasn't like a lot of, but, you know, it all got divided up and put on plates, and we sat around the table and chatted. And it just blew my mind. It just blew my mind, because it was just it was, you know, little scraps of things, and yet we shared them. And, you know, whatever we had, we shared there. It's it sounds like such a small thing, but it was just
This community.
yeah.
Thanks. Thanks.
You know, I had at times grown up with a sense of scarcity. You know, it's like my sandwich. Like, you know, don't try to take my sandwich. Yeah. So the lessons were early and deep, even in those simple things. Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's great. Thanks very much.
Well, I kept coming.
Yeah, you did. Look at you now.
Yeah. I'm still learning.
Anyone else have a question they would like to ask Orion?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Hi, Orion.
Hey, Margaret, it's nice to see you. Here, I'll put my glasses
Oh,
on.
good to see you too.
Yeah.
Wow. If you don't remember this, it's okay, because I don't quite remember it either, but I have some kind of a memory in Victoria of a clearness committee. And you came, and you were new to Victoria. I mean, you were new to the meeting for us, and you were saying you wanted to do some service. Do you remember anything about that? But I remember we were doing clearness. It's okay, as I say, it's just a vague.
I remembered when I arrived, I remember asking for a clearness committee, or a committee of care very early on, because I hadn't really found any sense of community yet, like just in Victoria. And that kind of got me grounded, and I got involved in the women's group, right?
Oh, yeah, our great women's group. Yeah.
Which was really pretty amazing. Lots of fantastic women in the group. So that was great. committee.
I just
I'm sorry, I
remember this-
don't remember that.
I
or
just
what
heard
sort
this
of-
thing about service and I'm thinking, how would that fit with your getting to CFSC? But never mind. I guess, yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't know. There could have been something. I
Yeah.
hope, one would hope I've had more than one. I remember you pulled me aside about once. I mean, eldering. That's what I'm reminded of. I remember once, because you were on M&C, I got pulled aside for something because you asked me about my process on this because we wanted to make sure that I had actually followed the process I should. I can't remember what it was.
I'm sure that was a correct question to be asking
But it
you.
was good. You know, I think back and I think, well, how great to have someone willing to approach someone, you know, no matter how long they've been going, to make sure that they're done things in kind of right order, you know.
Good
Often,
for me, I can't remember that at all. I
No.
remember learning lots of stuff from you.
I remember when I also remember when Connie Mungle pulled me aside and sort of lectured me about simplicity, because I used to have about 6 or 8 earrings in one ear, and she thought this was very unquakerly that I had this. But then the whole time she was talking to me, I was looking at her and thinking, "And you dye your hair."
Yeah.
So
Well, no hypocrisy amongst friends.
um,
I just wondered if you remembered that committee, because if I think of any more of it, I'll tell you, but I can't remember right now.
So I saw the hands go up in this order. I have Graham first, and then Marilyn, and then Jeanette. So Graham, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Hi, Orion. I was thinking I met you before you worked on CFSC. I was on I think it was HAMAC, but I remember being in the sunroom with Betty Peterson and Ann Thomas. And of course I was intimidated as hell. And you just strolled in and you did have colored hair and you had earrings. And I didn't know many lesbians, but I really liked you. But the one thing I remember is that you said, I'm a radical and I'm going to shake Quakers up. So
that's what you imagine I said. I'm sure I never said that, but that's what you
Maybe
heard.
I wished you said it. I don't know, but
I wished I said it. I think my outfit said it, but maybe I've had a few stories from people. It's like, yeah, I'm sure I never said that or thought that, but you know, probably something I was projecting something. But I remember, and I was Carolyn Perry there. I remember once
yeah,
walking.
Carolyn was on that committee
Caroline
too.
was there. Carolyn, and I remember Caroline was just so efficient. She just like got on it. She would leave the room, make phone calls in between meetings. But I was there, I was staying at a friend's house. I remember that because I was actually moving west. And I remember Betty Peterson was very excited about me going west because it was around the time of Clayoquot. And so she was happily crowing to people that Orion was going west and would get arrested at the Clayoquot, which never happened. Sad to say, I always felt it disappointed her. But anyway, yeah, it was like great to Friend's house. It's one of the miracles of Friend's house is you get to meet all kinds of people. And often I would be passing through Friend's house because I had family in Ontario, like my mom, and that's why I was in Toronto at that time. And the peace and tranquility of the third floor, I just, you know, even when I was at service committee, sometimes I go upstairs and take a bath because they had that great bath.
It's true. It's true.
It's just so nice. But you know, all the committees coming through, it's just magical when the committees are meeting. And always when folks would come to the house, when I saw on the schedule people were going to be coming, I always make sure that I kept my schedule a bit light on those days so that I'd have a chance to meet people, see people, talk to people, which comes back to like one of our core values, Jen, is relationship.
Mm-hmm.
The
Relationship.
work really is, relationship is vital to all that we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So did I accomplish anything, Graham? Did I shake things up sufficiently, or do I have to work a little harder?
I was going to ask you that, but yeah, you did. Every time I see you, you shake something up in me, so that's fine.
That's excellent.
Ask another question.
That's excellent. All right, I'm gonna hand the mic over to Marilyn.
Orion, did you ever go back to the 17th century and James Naylor?
Well, James and I kind of went back. It was just so impossible at the service committee. I mean, the service committee, especially in the role I was in, it really was vocational and a life in a way. I mean, I obviously didn't work 24/7, but it was my number one priority. And often when I had time to have free time, I didn't really want to stick my head in any more paper than what I had to already look at. But what I did do, because what I had done when I was at Woodbrook and at Pendle Hill, over time I had collected almost the copies of the original, all Naylor's pamphlets and many of his writings and their original publication, right? Sometimes things got reprinted. And I was able to share a lot of those with the two people that are Lucia Keening. You may remember that name, Lucia Keening at Quaker Heritage Press, and her husband, because they published a collection of Naylor's works, 4 volumes. And so the one thing I feel like I was able to be helpful with was I was able to send copies of so many of those down to them so that they could then republish them in their entirety. So, but it still, you know, informs my thinking. I wish I could have done more, and now it's like not happening. Sadly.
Okay, Jeanette, you have a question?
Hello, it's really good to listen to you tonight. And you've actually partly answered what I was going to ask you. You said that you spent time at Pendle Hill and Woodbrook, and I was wanting to ask when you were at Woodbrook and what you did there. But you've kind of answered part of that, really. And how long were you there?
I was at Woodbrook from, I went there first as a student. I did a term in, it was 97, 98. And that was really great. And then I was invited back as a friend in residence. And that's when I started to dig into Naylor. And I went to Pendle Hill in 98, fall of 98 through till January 2000. I did lots of different courses while I was there. I really encourage folks to go because I remember long ago when I guess it was Catherine Hertzberg, before I left for Woodbrook, she talked to me about, I was passing through Toronto and she said, you know, this is your formation. I was kind of shaken a bit by that word because you don't hear the word formation much anymore. But she saw that time apart from my regular life, to do study, to be with other people in community, to have time to reflect, to deepen my spiritual life, to deepen my Quaker knowledge, that would be a foundation for me, you know, going forward in life. And I believe that's true. And I think, you know, having a whole term away for people is, I think people can get a bit of that out of a week course or something, but really, it's a wonderful thing to do. And I was glad I did it before I was at the service committee. It did certainly ground me. Have you been there?
Woodbrook, I've been friend in residence at Woodbrook on many occasions, and I really have valued the time that I've spent there. And I've
Is that more recent?
Pardon?
Is that more recent or?
I've done it for about 10 years. In the last 15 years.
Well, the role really changed.
Well, the leadership, the director changed, and things changed quite a lot when Sandra Berry became the director after Jennifer Barraclough.
Yep.
Was it Jennifer Barraclough when you were there?
No, it was John Shelton. Yeah. But when I was there, I think I was among the first people that was there, not there invited as a scholar. And there were a team of us, women, that ended up there at that time and really focused our efforts on community building. It was Sally, who I cannot remember her last name, from Oxford, and Joanne O'Malley, and myself, Elaine Bishop. We were all there. And, you know, I think we made a point about, like, this should be a key part. This should, you know, this is what you need friends and residents for. It's nice to release someone to do academic work. And that's what I did on the side. But, you know, it was a community that really needed a lot of support. And not just the students, but often like the kitchen staff or the cleaning staff, or just the moral support you could provide to, you know, people that were working in the organization.
Yeah.
So kudos to you. It's a
Okay,
good form of service.
I'm going to hand the mic over to Chris Hitchcock, and then I have Pete Cross on deck.
Ooh.
So I'm encouraged by some of the other people who are doing things other than service committee work. You were important to me because we're born in the same year, and I met you within a month of moving from England to Vancouver, and I was feeling pretty disoriented, but you were at spring half yearly meeting, and I remember you teaching me some very fun queer folk songs, and many of which I still remember. And but also the work with the Pacific Northwest Quaker Women's Theology Conference. And
That's right.
I thought you, given that we're doing biography of Jane Orion, I thought you might want to talk about that.
Oh man, that had a huge impact on me. Not the least bit because that's where I met my future wife. Janet and I, the Quaker Women's Theology Conference, the Pacific Northwest Quaker Women's Theology Conference, was bringing together women of Canadian Yearly Meeting, Pacific Northwest Yearly Meeting, and Northwest Yearly Meeting, liberal and evangelical Quaker women into dialogue. And it was, I think, Betty Polster maybe that kind of encouraged me to go, who actually ended up on our clearness committee for marriage many years later. But it was really, yeah, that was a profound experience to try to meet people across the traditions. And the first one, of course, you know, I was so out at that one. If you remember, Chris, I think it was a little, you know, the theme was, what canst thou say? And I felt really led.
And you could say quite a bit.
Yeah, I could say too much sometimes. You know, I look back and I think, boy, I wish if I had the Today editor, like, you know, at any rate, yeah, I was pretty unfiltered back then. And I think it shocked some of the evangelical women, but it also got them talking. I remember I took that film that was Kate Friesen actually had helped produce. The Mennonites had produced about being gay, LGBTQ, and of faith. And it was actually great because it actually used their language. It used biblical language, you know, that could actually speak to a tradition different than liberal Quakers. So that was kind of pretty cool. And we remember we were on the committee for the second one.
Yeah, I think I took your place when you moved.
My place, because I went to England. And, you know, Janet was on that committee too. She got appointed to that committee because she kept dodging meetings. And so I kept not saying, you know, you knew then I was madly in love with her, didn't you?
I did. I think we commuted back after the thing that, and you were just like on cloud 9 the whole time.
Well, you know, saying goodbye, yeah, like we didn't get together till 7 years after, but it was, you know, it was kind of Montagues and Capulets, really. I mean, I was like this liberal Quaker from Canada, gay. Janet was from a very conservative evangelical yearly meeting and was a teacher at George Fox University, then college. And she was married actually at the time. So I mean, really, I couldn't really be.
To a man.
But to a man, not to a woman, obviously not. He did, that marriage ended shortly after, but at any rate, took a while, but here we are, and it's 17 years next month. We've been married. Victoria, monthly
Carolyn is 16, and she was there hidden inside me.
Wow.
So there you go. But I think that experience for me was part of my formation as a gay rights activist, which I
Wow.
didn't realize was sitting there until the school board where I was living in 2011 sort of exploded into this. Yeah, there was a big thing about what seemed like basic human rights for non-straight people. And yeah, but because of the work that I'd done over the years among friends, when the door opened, I was ready. And I was able to engage with people who were coming from positions of faith and some really severe misconceptions about what this would mean for their children. But was important part of my journey.
Well, I'm so glad you did that work.
Okay,
I
so
remember-
I'm giving the mic to Pete, and then Heidi Dick is going to be our last audience member with a question. So Pete first, and then Heidi.
Well, I want to tell a little story.
Uh-oh.
And Orion, you may or may not have anything to contribute to this, and I don't know whether I've told you this story. But as you alluded to earlier, I was on your hiring committee. I hadn't had much exposure to gay people. I think the only person I can remember was Cal Nelson, and I had some issues with Cal Nelson. And when I knew we were going to be meeting with you, I was pretty nervous about, I knew what I should think, but my gut told me something else. And I wanted to do the right thing. Well, we had the meeting and I was nervous and you were nervous. And we got through it and we hired you. And you were the first step on my way to being quite comfortable with gay people. I've had 2 clients since I've been quite close to, and a big transition in my life, and I thank you for that.
Well, Pete, it's always been such a pleasure to know you and be in relationship with you. And I'm glad that you I really appreciate you saying that, because I think it's important for people to say these things, because, you know, we all have biases, you know, and we have to overcome in our lifetime, and that we can. And I think so much of it happens through relationship and experience, right? You know, I mean, that's how things change is through meeting people that are what we think of as different than ourselves. So thanks. Pete's one of my favorite Quakers. He wonders why, but you know, there is just one illustration why.
Okay, Heidi.
Can I just make one add on to that, which I think this is also the value, although it's also maddening, of ecumenical justice work, right? As you would know, Jen.
Yes.
No, I served on the board of Kairos for over 10 years, right from its formation, and in the chair and as the treasurer on the executive for a long time, strategic planning, other things. And, you know, on one hand, I mean, it absolutely drove me out of my mind. I don't think there was a meeting I came back from where I didn't stomp around the office and tear my hair and, you know, gnash the teeth, right? It drove me crazy. So many different cultures, and the decision making was maddening, and the, you know, different ways of, you know, thinking and being. And of course it was there was still, you know, stuff with women to deal with and stuff with gay people to deal with. But on the other hand, there were all the differences, but there were also these pieces. We could come together of common mind on a number of pieces of work, and we strongly believed in those pieces of work and how they should move forward. And that's what united us. And we could stay focused on that, not on these other pieces where we knew we weren't going to find a common mind. We weren't going to work on gay issues at the Kairos table, I can tell you that.
But the bishops didn't want to work on that with you, Orion? Come on.
Oh man, me and the bishops.
Oh yes. Oh
Yeah.
yes. Okay, Heidi.
It's good. It's good to get stretched. It's been good. And it's even been good for you.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yep.
Hi, Orion. I'm just remembering the trip that you took across the country with a group of young friends, one of whom was Nathan. And I think you went
Yes.
also to a meeting in Halifax, didn't you?
We did. It was. We traveled across the country and we went with meetings and we talked
Yeah.
about spiritual revitalization.
Yeah.
You
That
know,
meant
it
a lot in his
was Natara and Nathan and Miriam and Miriam Maxey, Nathan Dick, Natara Curry. Maybe Georgia came on part of it. I can't remember. I'm sorry, I have a little block there just with my memory.
That's fine.
But yeah, it was fantastic going across the country with folks. And that was around 94, I think. Yeah. And we came to the early meeting out of that experience. And
What, that yearly meeting in Halifax? You went all the way to Halifax.
we went to the early meeting in Halifax. And I think John Calvi, was that the year John Calvi was there?
I'm not sure. I didn't go.
He might have been there. That might have been
Yes,
the year.
it was. That
Nathan
was the year. Yep.
Oh, that was a fateful year on more than one count. One is John Calvi, I think, did a thing on gender with the kids, and Nathan was then running around the site in a skirt, which was rather entertaining. At the time, he felt so free. I never seen Nathan look so free as when he was running around in that skirt. I have to tell you, it was just amazing. And on a more intense note, because a lot of things kind of came up and blew up at it didn't blow up at the Women's Center. The Women's Center and the Young Friends Yearly Meeting brought issues of concern around harassment and abuse in the yearly meeting to the attention of the yearly meeting. John's support was really helpful through that. But yeah, that tour was great. And as I say, I never could figure out how the Young Friends could handle me because I felt like I feel like I didn't really grow up with other young people. That may sound stupid, but I was a bit of a loner growing up and I bounced around a lot, and my formative relationships were so often with older people and not with my peers. So the Young Friends were always super gracious with me.
Well, I think it meant a lot, certainly speaking from Nathan, from his mother, it meant a lot in his life to have that experience with you. It was, and I think for other young friends, they were impacted as well. I think you've made a difference that way. Well,
thank you. They hugely impacted me, and if I've done anything helpful, that's great. And they were amazing to travel with, and we had it's great to visit different meetings because you get a sense of the different cultures of different meetings in different parts of the country, and
for sure,
that's important to understand.
Anyway,
okay, Orion, knowing that we are pushing you to your max here tonight, I have one last question for you to share with all of our friends. Please, can you tell people what is necessary, 100% necessary, if you are planning on having a staff meeting?
Sorry. Well, hey, donuts.
Donuts.
We have serious, what do you call them? Designer donuts here in town, Jen. And I know that's not usually our vibe. We're Tim's people, but come to Winnipeg.
I'm coming.
I'll get you a coffee crisp donut from.
Yeah, for designer donuts. Orion and I share many strange things. And one of them is you can't possibly have a staff meeting if nobody has brought donuts. Like, never mind, schedule it for another day. So yeah. I want to draw us into a close, and I just want to say, and I'm really sure that everybody watching is probably feeling the same way I am, but spending this 90 minutes together like this has reminded me, and I'm gonna not cry, but how much I miss you. And it's true, Orion and I were together every day for 15 years. And seriously, there were days when we both drove each other batty. And I'm sure that we both screamed about each other to other people, but I miss you so much. And I enjoy the times that we do get to spend together. I had a great visit with Janet and Orion when the Mennonites brought me to Winnipeg to do an event. I don't know, before the world closed down. And I was in Winnipeg and stayed with Janet and Orion, and we had a great visit then. And I look forward to the world opening up and having another trip to Winnipeg. Lana, you are allowed to cry. It would not be a
Lana will cry
CFSC
for you.
meeting if Lana was not crying.
Okay,
So
I'm gonna
please
make one
cry.
other point here. The picture, one of the pictures that didn't get shown was of me and Lana and a woman whose name I can't remember, and Jennifer Henry from Kairos, and we're in Brazil in 2003 at the World Social Forum. I was chair of the board of Kairos, and Lana was there because she was on a regional committee of Kairos. And so you can thank me for drafting Lana, because we had a big talk about Quakers there, and she asked me all about Quakers. You know, she says, Orion, tell me about the Quakers. So I did, and she's like, Orion, I think I'm a Quaker. Do you think there's any Quakers in Grand Prairie? And I said, no, I don't think there are any Quakers in Grand Prairie. You can go to Western Half Yearly Meeting. And she did. And the rest is history. So
And the rest is history.
Yes, I'm grateful for that. And
I would say one of the things too, and I think that even though Orion had to stop her role of being general secretary at CFSC, we all know, and even the staff that have come to CFSC after Orion left, I mean, Orion's a bit of a legend, frankly, and even the staff that came after her, I think that we all know that even though she's not in the office doing the pieces of work that she had done for so long, Orion is always upholding all of us, and she upholds the service committee always. And we know that, and we feel that. And I know that, you know, Orion's spiritual attention to the matters of service committee continues, even as she isn't working out of 60 Lowther anymore. And we are grateful. You know, we are grateful for your service, and we are grateful for your continued passion and for the work that we do, and even being available to all of us. I know that we reach out to you from time to time, and you're always available to us, and we are blessed. We are blessed with your time, your active service at CFSC, and we're blessed with your continued presence at CFSC 100%.
I'm always happy to support in what way I can. And I did want to put the plug though too, was I think the original question was, how did I get involved with service committee? And one of the first ways I got involved with the service committee was I read about it and I became a donor. And because of becoming a donor, it made me more interested in the work, because I then was reading everything more carefully. But I became a monthly donor. I was one of the very early monthly donors. And CFSC is in our will. And I feel that's a really important part of my my witness, you know, is to how to, justice is never going to be is going to be served in my lifetime, probably yours. We need to kind of think about those generations ahead of the work that will need to happen. And so it feels really important to, if you know, as we can, to resource that. So there, that's my plug for the 90th year.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that plug. And just to remind people that CFSC really does exist on donations from individuals like yourselves, and also from bequests. And that is what keeps us going. That's kept us going for 90 years, and it's what's going to keep us going in the future. And don't underestimate how important it is for people to write a check, however small, to CFSC. It's critically important, and it's what keeps us going. And so now I think we are going to try and wrap it up. I promise that I would. One of the things that happens when Orion and I get on the phone, this is no lie. This has been going on for years and years and years. 6 years since the accident. Okay, Jen, I should really stay on the phone 15 minutes. Okay, we will both watch the clock. We will get off this phone call. We do not. So it's just one of those things that happen. And I know everybody in Orion would probably enjoy staying on the Zoom for another see some more photos and have some more reminiscing, but I think that we will honor the 90 minutes. We will encourage people. So we're doing this series all year, and it's the last Thursday of the month. And our May speaker is going to be Elaine Bishop, who got mentioned tonight. So maybe Elaine will Also remember her times with Orion at Woodbrook. And Elaine also has a long history. She served as coordinator long before Orion at CFSC. So we'll be looking forward to hearing from Elaine. And I think that also, I just want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to follow. We have CFSC has such a plethora of ways that we can communicate in terms of, we have Quaker Concern, our newsletter. We also have our monthly e-news. If you're not getting those things and you would like to be getting them, just send your, before you sign off in the chat, put your email address to Kira and she will collect them, because we're happy to do that. And if you have any other feedback you'd like to give us on tonight, we're also really happy to receive that. And you can reach out to Kira or anybody at the office if you have any questions about our work. If you want me to give you some more colorful stories about Jane Orion, I might be bribable. Maybe
organize another session.
Yeah, we could organize another session.
Side or whatever. When you're done, can I have one final thing to say when you're ready?
It's over to you. Give us the last word.
Well, I guess my number one thing is that I could never express the amount of gratitude I have for the opportunity to serve at the service committee. I mean, it really was, I was aware of that every day, that it was, yeah, it was a special opportunity, and to try to stay, it's not, I wasn't always so humble, but I sort of like, I met so many incredible people, worked with so many, remember, people are changing all the time around those tables. And you have to adapt to that. But I just met so many dedicated, incredible people. And it was just such an amazingly formative part of my life, and really deeply informed my spiritual life, because I had to practice it and get stretched with every day, even when I was failing. I mean, obviously I made lots of mistakes and failed at many things in my time, but I hope I learned from that. And my only regret, if I ever regret, well, maybe not my only regret, but a big regret, is that after all this time of being away, that I can't really come back, because I feel like, may sound funny, but from my brain injury, I feel like the life that it's required has been also so deeply formative, that there's so much more I could bring back. But we won't get that opportunity, but perhaps through the support I can provide to people individually at times, that will be good. Yeah, super grateful. And the service committee was fantastic to me through the whole journey through my illness. We really worked together, and were open and honest with each other throughout it. And it was good. And I'm terribly thankful, because it doesn't always work out that way. And I think we learned a lot from previous experiences, and I'm grateful for that. And yeah, I've worked in a lot of different people and all different organizations over time, and I have really great esteem for the committee and the work that you do, Jen. You're like a rock star. Matt, Kira, Nancy, who I don't know yet. You're great people doing fantastically important work, and I wish you all the best. And it's so great to see all of you here. It's been a super duper treat, and it's going to take me days to recover, but it will have been worth it.
Well, it's been wonderful spending this time with you. I won't call you tomorrow, because I will give you days to recover. But thank you for everything you shared tonight. And we missed Gray. No, maybe we haven't missed Grays, but I don't know if I can do Grays tonight. We may have to watch Grays another day.
We can.
Okay, friends, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here with us for this visit with Jane Orion. I know that you must miss her as much as I do. And
if you want to be in touch, Kira can if you send Kira a note, she can send you my email.
Yeah, and we hope to see you all back here next month to hear from Elaine Bishop.